Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selina Woodruff. Slight disclaimer at the forefront, I've got like a bajillion kids in my house, so if you hear background noise, it is probably the kids. We will see if they keep it down. I kind of doubt it because they're kids, but just a heads up about that. So this week we are going to get into supporting teens through burnout. And before we do that, Selina has this week's parenting moment.
So those of you that do family meetings, I have a do not do tip on that. I don't know. Family meetings work well for our family. I think it's a good opportunity for kids to be able to voice their opinions and thoughts and come up with creative ways to solve problems that come up in a family. But a couple weeks ago, we had a couple things we needed to talk to our kids about, but it had gotten late and I needed to move on to a different assignment that I needed to be at, but I didn't want the chance to pass that. I felt like I needed to get all this information out and discuss a couple of things that Jared and I had pressing on our minds that we needed to talk to our kids about. And so we had them together. And so we were like, hey, family meeting, we need to tell you this, and this. And then the questions started coming. I'm like, no, we don't have time for questions. We're not asking questions. Keep the questions to yourself. We'll talk about it later. And again, I felt like the questions just still kept coming in a different way. They were asking in a different way. And we ended it, moved on. We all went to bed, went to different assignments, different things or whatever. And the next day I woke up and I was like, that's not really a family meeting. That wasn't really fair to them because we kind of unloaded some information on them and follow up on some things going on. And fair, they're going to have questions, right? And so I just like note to self, note to all of you out there, don't have a family meeting until you can actually have a family meeting. That really wasn't a family meeting. That was me just giving them information. But I did follow up with some of them and said, hey, I realized that like that was not a family meeting. I realized you had some questions. You actually had some really good suggestions that we had to just like shut down. I really want to hear them. Let's keep talking about it. Let's bring those up. What are your questions right now? Of course, it's better if we're all together to discuss and have those things, those ideas and questions, but to kind of ease their mind at the moment that I could, in that quick moments that I could in between things, for them to talk and say what they were thinking and experiencing in that. But that's just my suggestion. Don't have a family meeting unless you can actually take the time to hear it out and answer the questions and let them say what they're thinking and experiencing with it.
Well, and it sounds like that could have been, an opportunity to say, hey, prelude to the family meeting. This is a pregame.
Oh, yeah. So you could think and marinate about it for a while.
Yeah. I've got to give you all this information really quick and we don't have time for questions. So write down your questions and come prepared to discuss.
That means I need to follow up because we haven't followed up to come back around to it. So that's how it gets, right? You get busy and then I'm like, I got to cram this in right now and get this out there. I got to get that done. I didn't want to wait 2 weeks till we could talk about it, but I like that. I think I'm going to use that. I'm going to say, hey, this is a pre, and then write your questions down and then have a date or something that we can come back and really talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very real moment because, you have 7 kids. You're busy. And you know what? I'm pretty sure all of the parents have busy schedules because kids are just naturally busy with whatever reason. So yeah, very, very relatable.
I realized in my mind, like, I've moved on and I said what I needed to say and I got it out and explained to them. But in their minds, they're still probably like, wait, I got some questions. What are we doing? What's going on with this or whatever? So I do need to circle back and allow them to say what they're thinking.
We're holding you to that, by the way. We're going to ask on this podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
I better add it to my to-do list then.
Okay. So academic pressure, exhaustion, and mental load. I was kind of reading through this week's outline and thinking about this discussion. This is a really good topic of burnout because One of the reasons that we brought this up is because it's coming toward the end of the school year for a lot of families, and burnout is pretty common, especially for like maybe high school students. Seniors probably are really feeling burnout because they know the end is so close. But I feel like this can apply in a lot of areas. I think burnout can happen at any time. So I think it's really good to discuss this and really just in general helping when teens and maybe even tweens and a little bit younger kids feel overwhelmed with a task. I feel like sometimes burnout can really be heavily associated with feeling overwhelmed about a task. And I was reading through this and I'm like, eesh, yeah, I could definitely use a good refresher on this one because I've totally been guilty of saying, just get it done. Like you just got to finish it. You just got to get it done. And I think there's some better ways to do that. So you guys have been through this with a couple of kiddos, have been through, various maybe activities, academics, it could even be sports, like it could be anything. What are your guys' experience with burnout?
I think we do all the things you're not supposed to do quite often. We put a lot of pressure on our kids to get through it. And because that's the way we understand finishing up things that are maybe hard and challenging. Mm-hmm. And inadvertently, what's typically happening is we're just adding more pressure, and it's not helpful. And it definitely can increase the load for them. And kids today, like sometimes they've got a lot of pressure depending on what they're involved in. Academics could be tough. There's a lot of pressure to, finish up high school strong. If you're graduating, we have a senior in high school this year. Sports can be a really big one, right? And so we could get real tired of doing the things that are required for sports or for academics. And it can be challenging. And so as parents, we think, gosh, it's just a couple of more weeks, just get it done for Pete's sakes. Mm-hmm. But again, it's just not helpful. And so as parents, I know Selina and I are guilty of that. Like it's tough because sometimes the best solution is to just get it done. Like let's create a plan and get it done. But the way we approach it as parents can make such a difference. And the kid probably still needs to get it done. Right. But how we approach it can mean all the difference in their experience in getting it done.
And I really appreciate that perspective because supporting a burnout doesn't mean giving them a bailout. And I think it's important because, as adults, we also experience burnout. I mean, parents experience burnout all the time. And we don't get it out. And it is a part of life to just push through and get things done. But, these teens, they haven't experienced it the way we do. They're still building and working on that resiliency, and these coping skills. And I really do think that it kind of fits in with your core principle of it's going to build connection if you can offer them support instead of just adding to the pressure. Because, especially if they're on a team, their team's probably depending on them. And there's like burnout isn't a good reason to just stop going, to just stop doing the activity. I mean, obviously, if there's safety concerns, sure. But just because they're burnt out, that's not really a good reason to give up a sport, and now there could be instances, right? But in general, and it's the same thing with exams, with finals, with classes, like, we've got to help our teen manage it because a lot of times, they do just have to get it done.
Yeah. And I think as parents, we need to probably be cautious about overloading and overscheduling our kids. I think it is a fairly common struggle in today's society. When I was growing up and a kid, you could play almost every sport in high school. Yeah. And you just move from sport to sport. And it was a lot of fun. And for a lot of folks, I didn't play sports, but a lot of my friends did, and they could move from sport to sport. Today, there's a lot more pressure. You kind of have to pick a sport and commit your life to it. And that's probably a topic for another day that I worry about a lot with our youth, that they spend so much of their time dedicated to a sport that they're not going to play after high school anymore. And what other opportunities are they missing? What experiences are they missing as they grow up? Because every weekend is practice and every day is practice. And so we overschedule them. And so sometimes I guess what I'm getting at is we need to, as parents, look at what what are we doing to our kids? Is this really necessary? Do they need to be this busy? Do they have time to just be a kid? Do they have free time to explore and use their imaginations? Or is every minute of their day scheduled and accounted for, and they don't get to have free time? They don't get to be creative. So there's got to be this balance of understanding what's good and what's not good for them. And like you were saying, Liz, like, yeah, there's going to be an element of pushing through it, but there also has to be an element of self-care. And as parents, we get to model that, right? If we do a good job of modeling it, then our kids are going to probably be more successful walking through that. But we have to take care of ourselves. If we just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, at a certain point, we're going to break. And so finding balance through hobbies and creative outlets and whatever it is that brings you peace can be such a great tool to teach our children.
So one thing too that I think is a good modeling piece that parents can also do is parents can sometimes, or maybe even oftentimes, overschedule themselves. And if, teens see parents doing that, they're more likely to do that. And that could also be a really good learning lesson too. Like if your teen volunteers for everything, right? And you might be sitting here thinking, this isn't going to go well. What are your guys' thoughts? Do we let them do it? Or do we, say, do we put the kibosh on a couple of things, right? Do we put the boundaries? What are your guys' thoughts there on them creating their own burnout or potentially creating their own burnout?
I think any opportunity to learn is great. But I understand that sometimes that's not realistic in life, right? We have other kids to manage and that sort of thing. But even listening to what Jeremiah is saying and hearing those things, it's like sometimes we can look at it and be like, hey, is this an opportunity for them to learn? Like if they don't turn in an assignment, is that an opportunity for them to learn? We don't need to control or try to force them to do all the things that we expect should happen. Because sometimes I think, and probably just life in general, not just our teenagers, but, other people in our life, it's easy to look and be like, why can't you get that done? But you don't know what they're experiencing inside and what is in their head and even physical, like fatigue and that sort of thing. So sometimes I would say if it's an opportunity to learn and let them set up their schedule, let them fail as an opportunity to learn. Like that's not going to work. That's not going to play out how you think it's going to play out.
Yeah. I think some of the best lessons are learned the hard way. And, it's going to be much more effective if they do it themselves rather than, mom and dad just saying, that's a lot. You're going to burn out. Well, your teen's probably not going to believe you. They're not likely to believe you because they don't have the experience that we do. And, sometimes experience is the best teacher.
Also knowing that if you're the one that's going to have to be driving them around and taking care of it, like you can say what you're capable of doing or where your limits or boundaries are in that too, right? Like, oh, I'd love for you to be able to participate in that, but I can't because I'm taking you this or that, or I have other commitments. So it doesn't mean you have to take on all of those things too, if they're able to do it on their own. But
I think that's that modeling piece too, is, helping kids to see your own capability.
I think when that all plays out too, when you allow them to make those choices, when it comes to when they do have burnout, we have to practice real hard not to be like, I told you this is what was going to happen. We have to support them throughout it, right? When they want to come and complain and like, this is so much, this is hard. I told you it was going to be, it's just like, yeah, man, what are you going to do about that? That's hard. What are you going to learn? What are you going to do? How are you going to handle this?
Yeah. So this gets into some really good examples, right? Some real life examples. Maybe your teen is like, I have 3 assignments due tomorrow. I can't do this. And they're just kind of in panic mode. We can all probably look back in our academic careers and felt this at some point. So, an unhelpful response is, well, you should have started earlier, right? That's just kind of shutting down their feelings and minimizing their experience. So walk me through what a more helpful response would be.
I think I would work with them on focusing on like, that seems like a lot. We want to acknowledge what they're experiencing, right? For some reason, that acknowledgement just seems to bring that connection right into the room with you and your child, is the acknowledgement of what they're experiencing, whether you believe it or not. And yeah, you know what? It is their own fault. They made a bad choice in the day or whatever, right? They didn't manage their time, whatever it is. It's probably their fault. They probably shouldn't be in this situation, but that's not helpful. And so we acknowledge that, gosh, that feels like a lot. And that must be really hard. And so what's the most important of those three? Is there anything that we can put off? What's the first step we can take? What's something small that you can take care of right now? Something along those lines that helps them to start to put it into perspective in a way where they can accomplish what they need to.
Right. And, on the flip side, maybe it wasn't their fault. Maybe they just really were booked out that day. There was a perfect storm and they just can't get through it all. That could be a great opportunity to teach your kid, hey, sometimes we can't always do everything and we just have to do our best and, figure out the rest later. So again, helping them figure out how to prioritize those assignments, that could be really helpful for when they get into college. There can be so much pressure academically in college. And so, that's a great opportunity to teach a good life skill that can translate into all sorts of areas of their life where it's like, I'm not going to be able to meet every deadline. What do I have to prioritize and what can maybe go by the wayside a little bit? Great life lessons to be learned.
Yeah, and it's hard for kids. It's hard for adults as well to say, you know what? It's actually okay if I just bomb this assignment. Like straight A's in school are not necessarily going to be the end all be all to your success or failure in life, right? Like, especially if we're just got way too much going on, sometimes maybe an assignment has to be skipped. You do the best that you can. And this is how you're going to, function as an adult as well. So, maybe we might have to help them see that and understand that it's okay if you don't get an A in this class because you couldn't, get to all the assignments that you had this week.
I don't think this goes away because I'm thinking last week I had 3 things that I was like, shoot, which one am I gonna focusing and work on? Because all of these are pressing, needing to be done things, right? And so it's like building that skill and helping them see. And of course, teaching, planning and preparing ahead of time and distractions. And I mean, we could talk about phones and how that plays a role in all this too, but it doesn't go away. So what's the skill we can learn to help us the rest of our life of making those choices, making those priorities, being okay when things don't go the way that we think they should, and not letting it get to a point that it's so overwhelming that we can't do anything.
All right. So I appreciate that you brought up cell phones, Selina, because a lot of times cell phones or sort of technology, it can be a way to avoid. That can be a symptom of feeling overwhelmed, and maybe they haven't acknowledged it yet. And it's so tempting to just be like, get off your phone and do your homework. I think we've all said that, like, hey, knock it off. Like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be getting your work done right now. You know how busy you are. Like, stop procrastinating. So walk me through a better response.
We have to probably work through the process of figuring out what's actually happening here, right? Sometimes being on the phone is a procrastination tool because someone's feeling overwhelmed, and it's a way to kind of numb themselves from that responsibility. And so we need to start having a conversation in a situation like this. We need to start asking some curiosity questions and figure out where they're coming from. Like, hey, how are you feeling? What's going on? Those kinds of things, to understand like what is happening for them. Why are they procrastinating? Or is the phone really just a problem? Because sometimes it is, right? Sometimes there's this addictive nature that comes because of phone usage, that we get these crazy dopamine hits from, scrolling through endless videos. There's a reason why the videos don't end, right? We can just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. There's not a bottom to it. And so most of our listeners probably already know mine and Selina's take on cell phones and access to those kinds of things on cell phones. Anyway, we want to look at like what's actually happening here. Do we need to set more boundaries, or do we need to help them figure out how to better manage their time? there's things that I've done with folks before who have that struggle where they end up scrolling on their phone instead of doing homework or something of that nature. And one of the things that I've found successful is to work with them in the sense of setting up some time constraints, right? It says, hey, I want you to work for 30 minutes on your homework, and then you can set a timer and spend 5 minutes on your phone playing a game or scrolling on social media or whatever you want to do. And then we're going to go back to the homework, and we can kind of switch back and forth to kind of manage some of that load, because sometimes the homework and the schoolwork can be overwhelming for kids. And having just little bites like, oh, I can do anything for 30 minutes. I can focus on this assignment for 30 minutes. And that seems to be helpful for a lot of people, not everyone. And so just kind of working with them to understand, hopefully to answer your question here, Liz, to understand, like, is this more of an issue with being addicted to a cell phone, or is there something else going on? Is my child feeling overwhelmed? Are they feeling burned out? Are they feeling, incapable of actually getting done all the work that they need to, so they're just ignoring it and playing on their phone? Or is there more of an issue with being addicted to scrolling social media for endless hours?
So I see my kid on their phone scrolling, and they're complaining that they have so much homework, and then I see them scrolling, right? What? Everyone can relate to that? Okay, we've all experienced that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I think asking that question, are you avoiding this because it feels overwhelming? To me, that would set up in my mind, because like I see that, I'm annoyed, right? I'm like,
Yep.
oh yeah, you got so much homework, I can tell. And so you're annoyed. But I think when you ask, are you avoiding that because you feel overwhelmed? To me, that shifts it in my mind and helps me come more from curiosity and compassion than irritated that what they're choosing to do. So then I feel like you can understand what they're experiencing, where they come from. And honestly, I would have more compassion, because I'm like, oh, dang, yeah, I get it. I know how you feel, because it's hard and it's easy to just scroll on that when you feel very overwhelmed. And so I think it's going to open up and be a better communication, and you're going to come from a better place when you are understanding what they're experiencing instead of just being irritated that they're doing it.
And, I also think, too, to add to that normalizing breaks is a good thing. And, maybe shifting between homework and social media, that might be too tempting. But there are certainly other ways that I think are a great way to help minimize burnout. Hey, you're feeling overwhelmed. Rather than scrolling on social media, get up and take a walk. Clear your mind, do something else, listen to a song, go get a snack, go get a drink of water, right? Like, get up, leave the room, and do something else that's moving your body. I think that's going to actually be a lot more helpful than just sitting and moving to some sort of other electronic device, especially because so much of homework is electronic these days. Get away from the electronics. That is going to promote much better balance and, help with things like screen fatigue and eye fatigue, headaches, all those things. So it can be really helpful and healthy to just kind of say, hey, set that timer for 30 minutes and then get your butt up out of the chair and go do something for 5 minutes. I mean, you don't have to say it like that, but you get the gist of what I'm saying.
Yeah, get the good natural dopamine pumping through your brain when you get up and be active, right?
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so another thing that teens, I feel like, can fall into that can maybe cause them to feel overwhelmed is perfectionism. If I don't get an A, what's the point, right? So they're feeling overwhelmed just by the pressure. And maybe they do have the time. It just feels overwhelming because they maybe feel like they don't have the capacity. Maybe they're too tired. They don't understand. They need extra help, right? So this can be a really great opportunity to build that connection and to maybe help them see how they can shift their priorities. What are your guys' thoughts on this?
Yeah, perfectionism is a tough one. A lot of us experience perfectionism. And, I hear a lot about things from individuals who struggle with perfectionism where, like, if I'm not going to get it exactly right and perfect, it's not worth doing to me. I'm not even going to try. And that is really a difficult place to be because it'll hold you back from accomplishing many things. So, maybe a response if we have a kid say something like, hey, if I don't get an A, then why should I bother with this? we might ask or make a statement that sounds like, hey, man, that really feels like you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. What do you think might look good enough for you at this moment or right now as you work on this, and start to explore like not getting a perfect grade? And this is something that I feel like I understand, because I have a lot of perfectionist tendencies. And if I don't get, when I was in school, if I didn't get 100% on something, like, it was a big deal to me and it was a real struggle. And I've had to learn to like let go of that. And it's not easy. So being a little bit sensitive to a child that has some perfectionist tendencies could go a long way in helping them see that, like, hey, it's okay if you don't get 100% or you don't get an A on this assignment. Could be quite helpful for them.
And maybe helping them see things a little bit more long term, right? Like, just, again, acknowledging that it feels important in the moment, and that it is a good thing that they want to do well. Like, that's a great characteristic trait. But then maybe help them to see, in 10, 15 years from now, this one assignment or this grade or this one class is not going to make or break you. And, we want to be careful with that, because we don't want to minimize what they're feeling. And so, you can definitely focus on, I understand your need to want to do this right and to want to get this good grade. And that's an admirable trait. But, your mental health is more important, or your physical well-being is definitely more important than a grade right now. And, I think too, again, in that moment, saying something helpful, like, I can see you're overwhelmed. Why don't you give it 5 minutes and then come back to this? Maybe a 5-minute break of doing something completely unhomework related might kind of get your mind off of it and help you refocus. And this might feel more doable. So, kind of offering them maybe just some helpful coping techniques with that in the moment chaos of feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think that you're right there. My son would want to talk about exposure therapy. So he would say that maybe we should encourage them to get a B on an assignment instead of an A and see that they didn't die. They're okay. And there may be a situation where that becomes really valuable. And
Yeah.
you could do that, if the perfectionism is really a struggle for a child. Not a terrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
We had a child, years ago, struggle with spelling. We had a teacher that had a great point, because the child was getting pretty upset and starting to let it affect their self-confidence. And it was like, let's celebrate that we only missed 5 this time instead of 8. And I just really appreciated having that perspective, that not just like celebrating the hundreds, but let's be celebrating when we are making progress in any aspect.
Yeah, that can apply really well with sports as well. I think sometimes kids maybe feel burnt out because maybe they're on a team where their team just keeps losing, and they're like, what's the point of even doing this anymore? I'm not having fun because our team is just going to lose. What's the point? Right. Or maybe, it's a championship game, and, and they're feeling a lot of pressure. And so they're feeling burnt out in that way. Those are all really great times to kind of help them to maybe step back and try to shift their focus. And, sports can maybe be a little bit more difficult because performance anxiety is a real thing. And, that could be a whole nother episode. But I think in those moments when we say things like, well, you can't just back out of it, can feel really invalidating. And so it is important to just acknowledge the emotion that they're feeling kind of in the moment. All right. So the last thing that I want to hit on real quick before we wrap up is when burnout might need more support, right? So if your teen is just feeling ongoing exhaustion, they've lost interest in everything, they're emotionally withdrawing, then it's time to get some additional support, right? Maybe you get the school involved. Most schools these days have really great resources in terms of like social workers and counselors. Maybe you look at getting them a professional counselor, outside of a school setting, or, any type of outside help. There's lots of really great resources out there.
Yeah. And we want to do that at any time we feel like we're not managing that burnout in life. Even if we've made the changes and we're doing the things that we know how to do, if we're not getting better, we definitely want to get some professional help, and maybe even us as parents to get some help, because we don't want to have continuing burnout. We're going to end up with some other struggles and challenges that are going to come along if we don't help a child to understand that we've got to take care of ourselves. We've got to take care of our bodies. We've got to manage what kind of tasks we put on ourselves in a healthy way so that we don't get overwhelmed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so next week we are going to get into teaching teens integrity when no one is watching, and we will see you all then. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.